My father died about 5 years ago unexpectedly from a heart attack. To say it was hard on my mother and me was an understatement. Our old house in Knoxville just didn't feel like home anymore. About a year later, Mom and I made plans to take ourselves and our elderly dog, Ace, on a move further south to a small town situated about a half hour from Atlanta. Just a few days before we were slated to move, however, I had one of the most vivid dreams I've ever come to experience. All that was within my dream was my bedroom. A picture-perfect recreation of the real thing. I sometimes wonder if I was in some sort of sleep paralysis state when it occurred. To further add to the dream's realism, in the middle of the night, the streetlights right across the street would illuminate through my window, creating a light reflection on the wall perpendicular. In my dream, as I lay there staring at that exact reflection on the wall, I saw an orb of smoke fade in from the shadows. Goosebumps chilled across my skin as I lay there panicked and afraid to move a muscle. Suddenly, it stopped moving and steadily hung in the light's reflection as if it was staring at me. Without warning, it spoke to me in my dead father's voice. "I'm sending something to watch you." Despite hearing my father's voice come from the orb, I was terrified of it. I didn't know why, and yet I managed to squeak out a small reply towards it. "What?" I whispered. The orb remained silent for a few moments, leaving an eerily dead silence in the voice's place. Just as quickly, it spoke to me one final time. "Damn, Black." I woke up almost instantaneously, gasping for breath. The nightmare had chilled me to my core. I didn't know exactly what to make of it, especially those two final words. I chalked it up to maybe Dad wishing us well on our move, but at the time, I couldn't shake the feeling it was some kind of warning. Within the next couple of weeks, my mother and I moved out of Knoxville and headed down south to Georgia. She had managed to find a quaint little house for us. With only 1 or 2 neighbors down a gravel road in the middle of the woods, it was a nice fit for us. Probably the best reliever of all the stress that came with the move, however, was our new neighbor's cat. She was a petite, older black cat that gravitated towards me almost instantly, and I treated her as if she was my own pet. I left out a can of food once or twice a week for her, and even if I didn't call out for her, when she saw me outside, she would always run up to me. She helped ease my tensions about leaving Knoxville behind, especially without Dad there with us. Less than a month into our new house, I awoke suddenly to a faint coughing noise that sounded like it was coming from downstairs. One important thing to know about our dog Ace is that he has a collapsed trachea. He needs medicine to help calm the condition down, so I'm used to waking up in the middle of the night to give him his medicine. I proceeded downstairs from my bedroom to give him his cough medicine, but I couldn't find him anywhere throughout the house. He wasn't in his bed sleeping, he wasn't in the kitchen, he was nowhere to be found. I didn't check Mom's bedroom, however, as to avoid waking her up. Besides, I wouldn't have heard the coughing if he had been in there anyway, so I just let it be. That's when I heard the cough again, but it was coming from further away, as if from outside. I looked over at the side patio door leading out into the woodlands and realized I had forgotten to shut it. There it stood, slightly ajar. Shit, I thought to myself. He got out. I immediately ran outside with a flashlight and started calling out for my dog. "Ace! Ace!" I shouted into the neighboring trees. I heard another cough and shined my light in its direction. That time, it had echoed from down the gravel road. I swear, a path had never looked so terrifyingly desolate before in my life than that night as I stared down the same gravel road that had led us to our new home. But in that moment, I thought my dog was lost, and I chalked it up to new house jitters, so I pressed onward. "Ace, come on boy, home's this way, buddy." That's when I heard it, the cough that I had been following, almost right beside me. But this time, it didn't stay like the dry cough I had been hearing. Instead, the cough had slowly descended into a low growl. I shined my light towards the new sound. There stood a bright red fox in the middle of the path. For a moment, I figured it was some kind of sick fox I had mistaken for my dog. The whole time, as I was processing what I was seeing, it stared directly at me. Its eyes glowed from the light of my flashlight. However, our stare broke when it tilted its head to the right. I looked down, and there she was, our neighbor's little black cat standing beside me. However, it was as if she had completely changed persona. She was no longer the happy, affectionate cat I had come to know. Instead, She had her back arched upright, every fiber of hair standing at attention, and uttered the lowest growl I had ever heard come out of a feline. In that moment, I figured she was just scared of the fox, so I knelt down beside her in a bid to coax her away and avoid the fox hurting her. But no matter how many times I tried to coax her out of fight mode, she wouldn't budge. Her stare remained unfazed. That's when I looked towards the direction of the fox once more. But there wasn't a fox standing there anymore. Instead, in the exact same spot of that gravel road, was a walking, rotting corpse of a roadkill coyote slowly moving towards me. I took a step back, absolutely horrified of what I was seeing. Its jaw was hanging loose from its face. One of its eyes was stained with blood, and it wobbled back and forth as if it was desperately fighting pain. I rubbed my eyes out of disbelief, hoping I was imagining it. But it was still there when my eyes reopened. Despite the gruesome sight before us, our neighbor's black cat, no matter how tiny she was, stood there and kept growling at the creature. Suddenly, it stopped. The creature had ceased its walk towards us. For a moment, it just stood there, glancing back and forth between myself and this little black cat that was trying to defend me. That's when I unmistakably heard this beast mutter two solemn words in a low, gravelly voice. "Damn, black." In a flash, the creature ran straight into the woods. I shined my flashlight in its direction, but it had completely vanished. Even the brush it had run through looked untouched. That's when the cat, still standing beside me, calmed herself down. Almost as if nothing had happened, she rubbed herself up against my leg, returning to her normal, loving mood. Despite technically not being mine, I proceeded to scoop her up and run back into the house. Before heading upstairs with the little black cat snuggled up in my arms, I decided to poke my head into my mother's room. Laying on the floor, sound asleep, was Ace. He had been there the entire time. I quietly closed her door before bolting upstairs. I made sure that little cat slept with me in my bed that night. From the research I've done, I think I was almost the victim of some kind of skinwalker. It must have picked up the sounds my dog sometimes makes late at night, knowing I'd likely come to his aid. For whatever reason, our neighbor's black cat had scared it so badly, it scrambled away. I haven't seen it since that night. Maybe because that same cat still likes to wander down the gravel road late at night. Or maybe that thing just decided I wasn't worth the trouble. Either way, whether I have my father or pure luck to thank, I leave a can of food out every single night for that little black cat. And the most ironic part of it all? That cat's name is Halloween. My grandparents have a cabin in a town in Pennsylvania, south of Scranton. Every summer we usually go up for a few weeks as a family event, ever since I was little. A few years ago, we decided to go up in the winter because my family wanted to go skiing at some point. After we got there, the weird things started happening really quickly and seemingly out of nowhere. The house was built in the 1920s, an old brick and wood home. The doors are these giant, almost church-looking doors, and the style of the home is very medieval, definitely adding to the creepy vibes of the home. The first night was seemingly calm throughout the house, but whenever I went there, I always felt there was something there, or something lurking through the halls. The first night I got up to go to the bathroom at around 3:10 a.m., which is also interesting because I never get up to go to the bathroom back at home. Most nights I sleep right through without waking up. There were 8 of us in the house, my 2 parents, my grandparents, my aunt and uncle, and my 2 male cousins. I went to one of the 3 main bathrooms, 4 in the house if you count the master. So when I heard someone in there, I thought that was interesting, because I was one of the few people who doesn't share the bathroom. But I stood outside waiting to make sure I did not intrude on anything going on in there, as my one cousin has IBS, and I didn't want to bother him. What was extremely weird is the fact that whatever was in there didn't sound human in its movements. It seemed to drag its feet around, which made me nervous that he may be sick. I called out his name a few times. "Drew, are you okay in there? It's been a long time and I want to go to bed," or something along those lines. A few seconds later, he comes out of his bedroom and tells me why I'm making so much noise and he's trying to sleep and slams his door behind him. Before I could freak out, he had already shut the door and I was too scared to even yell back to him. I never realized before that the door wasn't even locked in the first place, which made me feel even more uneasy. Between the banter, I never realized the sound stopped, and it seemed like nobody was even in the bathroom anymore. I still even tell myself this was just my imagination going wild, but I'm not known for sleepwalking or having any type of sleep disorder. I decided to just open the door, brushing it off as my too vivid imagination. When I opened the door, it really looked like nothing strange had happened in there. But when I was washing my hands, I realized the window was open, and I froze thinking someone had broken into the house. But this was on the second story, with nothing to climb up on, making it almost impossible to climb up there. The next day, nothing happened in the daytime, making it seem more to me that it was just a figment of my imagination than reality. But that night, I had to let out my dog. She is elderly and never really barks much, nor does she run fast, so this definitely is a cause for concern, I thought. When I let her out, she bolted to the edge of the woods and vanished inside them. I tried to follow her barking, but honestly, I was too scared to go into the woods past the tree line. When I finally got her to walk back, her back legs seemed off, almost like a person pretending to be a dog walking on the ground. Her eyes were also off. They looked human-like, not her usual dark almond eyes. I freaked out and ran back inside without her. When I got inside, she was sitting panting by the door, so she must have run back in when I was yelling into the woods to try to find her. At this point, I didn't even want to leave that house, for fear of what was lurking in the woods. I had no previous information on skinwalkers, or even knew what they were, so I had not connected the dots yet. The last night we stayed there was the most interesting and confusing turn of events that had happened. We all had skied all day, so we went to bed quite early, around 9, 10. I never fall asleep early, as I'm usually a night owl. But I woke up around 12 a.m. to sounds of my cousin Drew yelling outside. I woke up in a fog and tried to quickly rush to the door and open it. I didn't even take into consideration that the door was still locked from the inside. When I got outside, his voice seemed to be coming from multiple directions and echoing through the valley. I saw him by the cars yelling, and when I started to go outside and call out his name, he looked at me quickly. His eyes got huge, and he ran into the woods with a beckoning gesture for me to follow. I decided that was definitely a bad idea, so I woke up his parents and he ended up being asleep in his room the whole time. Not until years later did I even find out about skinwalkers from one of my Native American friends I met in college. I still have no idea what was out there that weekend, and I haven't been back since.